there's less churches now per capita than there were in 1776. A lot of people seem to think
Interesting.
that there's tons of churches. That's just not true.
Mm,
And we've actually had more churches close the last several years than started. So there's a need for more churches. There usually always is a need, and I think also Americans, a lot of good evangelical churches though prioritize mission work over local church planning. And I'll just
yeah.
say, if we don't have strong local churches, there's no money or missionaries to send across seas. So they don't
Yeah.
have to be at odds. I don't think they are. But what I would say is, you guys act like they are, because, or like church planting at home doesn't matter, and they do. Most church plants fail, and they fail quickly within 3 years. They're usually a disaster for a lot of reasons. I think they're a disaster they're almost always started by unqualified men, and men that are neither qualified nor gifted to do the work of pastoring. Guys that think if they listen online or whatever to a bunch of sermons, and that the work of pastoring is mostly public speaking, which it's
Yeah.
not. The
Or
hard work
if
of
they just
pastoring.
go to seminary and get a degree, then they're qualified.
Yeah. And let me just say something to defend everybody. The reason so many people are against seminary is because you would fail and you can't do it. And that's why you didn't do it. I hear
Mm,
people call it cemetery and all that. Like, but knowing scripture is hard, right? Knowing the whole, studying each book of the Bible. When in my ordination in the PCA, my licensure exam took about 2.5 hours. My ordination exam, this is an oral exam before a committee of other elders, took 3 hours. Brain was breaking down. I had to be able to, outline every single book of the Bible. I had to be able to recall the entire shorter catechism by memory, had to be super conversant with the larger catechism. I had to be able to answer any question about theological controversies. I had to show my ability to understand church government, especially as expressed in the Book of Church Order, the PCA. I had to take a Greek and Hebrew exam, and when my written exam took like 4 or 5 hours. And then I had to go stand in front of I had to preach in front of a bunch of pastors, some of them well-known preachers. And then I had to stand before presbytery and answer questions from anyone on the floor, with like another 100 elders in front of you. Okay.
mm,
Like, I had to do all that. It was really hard. And, but you know what? I guess I know doctors and lawyers and all those guys get trained. Maybe it's not necessary. Maybe you can read Mother Kirk by Doug Wilson and Seeing Through New Eyes with James Jordan and go plant a church. It's going to be fine. And I recently have heard the lightliness people take with church planting. These are souls. These are
yeah.
people. And these are people, and it is so easy to screw up, even when you are trained. And even when it's part of the problem with seminary. The seminary should stick, I think, to the more theoretical aspects of the ministry, the more abstract,
Mm,
and just get 2 years, knock out 2 years of hermeneutics and your original language, and some of the more academic, intellectual side that does matter. Uh, because in ministry, a lot of times that's like the part of the iceberg that's underwater, people don't see, but you've done the hard work. And so
yeah.
when you've done that hard work, sometimes if I have to write a sermon in 4 hours, which I do many weeks, I'm not rediscovering this stuff. You know what I mean? Like, I had to write papers and all this. And so you've got something to draw from, but leave that to seminaries, and then have like some sort of practical, like, how do you moderate an elders board?
Mhm.
Like, what's a good way to do it? How do you moderate? How do you train officers, elders, and deacons? How do you deal with church conflict? What do you do with a transgender kid? What, like, in your church? How do you deal with sermons at funerals when it's like the second cousin of one of your members who's clearly not a believer, but they want you to do the funeral?
Yeah.
Right? How do you deal with the death of children? All this. How do you do hospital visits? How long do you stay? Do you know to get on the side that they're looking at? That way their body doesn't have to turn and look at you the other side. Do you know that you should only stay maybe 15 minutes unless they ask you to stay longer? Right? Like, where you have to learn this stuff. and someone's got to teach you. And I think really a lot of people aren't prepared for church plants the way they should, and we just have a very low view of the church. Now, all that being said, that's me, like, to the guys that think, that have kind of talked down to the work of a pastor. Most of them, I just want to say, you can't hang, and you think you can, and you'll find out. And it's like, just believe me, you can't. Like, get trained, get prepped. The best way to do it, if you can't go to seminary, is to really intern yourself underneath a pastor somewhere that you respect. See how he disciples his family, see his time management, see how he balances that. Eventually get to the place where you can sit in on elders meetings, write papers, let him criticize it, let him criticize your character. I mean, so much part of being a pastor is being able to, like, keep a cool head when everyone's mad at you and where everyone's like reacting. And so you become the right man. I think a lot of church plants, what happens is, like, they like, I want to be Doug Wilson church, right? I've been listening to Flat Laugh Feast. I really like covenant renewal worship and liturgy and all this stuff. And I got these other families that, like, are really into Christian education and paedo communion or theonomist, whatever boutique sort of Christianity is going on there. And they all gather and they start this church, and then they call a pastor. And then some younger guy comes out there, takes it and whatever. And the church, though, is, they already have a vision of what they want the church to be, which is, they want it to be Moscow, but Moscow took 50 years of Doug Wilson being some hippie guitarist to who he is now, right?
Yeah.
Or, well, not really hippie, but Jesus music. I mean, he was a
Sure.
naval guy, and all that developed. So what I would say is, like, part of the problem is that we're trying to create franchises instead of plant churches that make disciples.
Yeah.
And each context is different. Corinth is not Colossae. Colossae is not Corinth. Same gospel, same doctrine. But Paul, as he addresses the problems in Colossae, he's addressing different problems that he is in Corinth, right? He doesn't have to address the abuse of the spiritual gifts for whatever reason in Colossae. But in Corinth, he doesn't have to deal with whatever the weird proto-Gnostic angel worship stuff going on in Colossae. And so this is not a simple way of answering your question, but it's been on my mind a lot lately. So you're getting the intense version.
That's good.
What I would tell guys is that really take preparation serious. I would join a church and try to reform it first. And I would encourage you to move and join a healthy church before planting one. How can you create that which you don't understand? I mean, that's part of the problem is, as men, if we didn't have good dads, we're like, so how many hours? I remember I used to play with my kids like 4 hours every night because I didn't want to be a bad dad. I didn't know that's not normal, right? Like, that's crazy. I'm overcompensating. And I had to, like, kind of balance that out. Well, how can you play in a church if you don't even understand one? Oh, well, my heart's in the right place. Do you think all those people started out with evil intentions? You know, that's probably not what happened. And so I would say, but there's sometimes, like, you have no choice. And if you have no choice, start gathering with a group of people, reading the Bible, seek help from a denomination, try to bring in a pastor and let that pastor help you create the vision of the church, work through all that stuff, and take your time. But man, do not take church planting lightly. I think we're going to see a bunch of the 2020 churches that were planted. A lot of them fail. Like East River, we're only 2 years old, right? Yeah. Jury's still out, man, right? I mean, God's been good to us, and we have a lot of elders, and we've got a pretty large membership here. But, you know, like, we had I've been trained. My other two elders have been trained. My other ruling elder is in his 60s and been serving the church for a long time. We have a lot of good things. And I just think, take it slow. Why would you not get some sort of education? Why is the ministry not worthy of hard work? You know? And so I guess I didn't really answer your question. And I guess people are going to hear, I probably shouldn't church plant. And that's probably true. So thank you for listening to the Closed Minded podcast. So there you go. I love church planting. I do, but we need help in the reform world. Right? they're failing left and right. And it's one thing to be part of a failed church plant, it's another one to be the one that the fault really rests on with it failing because of not taking it serious.